All right. We are back here on this show. Right now, we are ranking our top 10 head coaches in the NFL. We just finished ranking numbers 10 through 6, and now it's time for some brand new tricks. We got our top 5. And Zach, I'm in first on the last one, so I'm going to send over the mic to you immediately to begin ranking your top 5.
All right, let's get into it. At number 5 is a guy I've learned did not make your list, and I get why. This is the one part of my list that is a little outside the box. Might be an overreaction. I don't think it is, though. I'm going to have Brian Daboll of the Giants at number 5. And everything that this guy did last year was just so impressive. And honestly, for a first-year head coach, especially considering the situation he walked into, it's one of the more impressive coaching jobs I ever remember. Like, we forget, this New York Giant team was not only bad, but they were an embarrassment when Joe Judge, his second year, he got fired in 2021. They went 4-13, and honestly, I would have guessed it was worse than that. I mean, like, oh my God, that team was awful. And Brian Daboll took that same team, the same quarterback in Daniel Jones, the same guy the Giants themselves didn't even pick up the fifth-year option for. They took him, Saquon Barkley, and really just a lot of the same guys they had from the year prior, and they turned that into a playoff team. And the thing about the Giants last year, which was so impressive to me, was everything was just so organized. Like, they never beat themselves. And for me, when I'm looking at things I value in a head coach, that right there is excellent. I also think, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's anyone now, like the duo and coordinators of Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale. I'm not sure if there's a better pair of coordinators in the league on both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball that I'd take over those two guys. I think if you ask me which trio in the league is the best of a team's head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator, my answer would be the Giants. I think Kafka's a guy that's going to be a head coach in the league sooner rather than later. If I was the Cardinals, that would have been a guy that would have been really high up on my wish list for a new head coach this year instead of Gannon. I do think also that Wink Martindale is a guy that I don't know how he's never been a head coach every year, whether it's in Baltimore, whether it's in New York. His defensive unit is usually towards the top of the league. And Brian Daboll, he made Daniel Jones look like a whole different quarterback and made him a whole lot of money. And one more thing I will say too, keep an eye out for this. Josh Allen had the worst year since his breakout year 3 last year in his first year without Brian Daboll. I think we really saw the difference in Daboll and Ken Dorsey last year in Buffalo, and I do worry what Josh Allen really is and his ceiling if he could really get to that without Brian Daboll. I've said it before, I think this guy could be the next Andy Reid, the next great offensive mind in the NFL. What he was able to do with the Giants last year, super impressive. I'll have him at number 5. At number 4, I will go with the guy that I believe 2 years ago when we did this list, I also had him in the top 5, and he's done a whole lot of winning, especially in the playoffs since then, and that's Kyle Shanahan of the San Francisco 49ers. And for me, when I look at Kyle, last year, it was crazy. We all thought the 49ers were done when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, and that was even in a weak NFC when really Philadelphia was the only constant of a team that was looking like the top-notch team in that NFC conference. And Brock Purdy had this team rolling. Mr. Irrelevant. I still feel like we don't talk about that enough. The fact that this Niners offense didn't only get worse, it got better when Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy took over. We finally saw the ceiling in the passing game especially that we've been looking for with this 49er team when Brock Purdy took over. And a lot of people, including, I will say myself, why doesn't Kyle trust Jimmy G more? And we kind of saw that. Jimmy G had trouble towards the back end of his time in San Francisco turning the ball over, but with Brock Purdy, he had him rip the ball, and this 49er offense was unstoppable since then. I do think, of course, the Super Bowl is the one thing he's missing. Of course, you obviously want to see him get that, but this 49er team, their window is wide open. There aren't many better offensive minds in the league than Kyle Shanahan. What he's done since he got to San Fran especially, I feel like a lot of people thought when he first got hired, like, oh, he's just Mike Shanahan's son. What does this guy have any business doing being a head coach? Nah, he's one of the best coaches in the league, one of the best offensive minds in the league. I will have him at number 4. At number 3, it's funny because I have a guy at number 3 whose team didn't have a great year last year. I'm not even necessarily expecting his team to have a great year this year, but I respect him so much as a head coach that there's no shot he wouldn't make this list. And that, of course, is Sean McVay of the Los Angeles Rams. And when I look at the Rams this year, right, I just said it. There is no reason why this team should be good, right? They really have 4 or 5 good players. You know, they're great players, but Matthew Stafford, Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, And that's about it. Like, they don't have much than that. But the Rams are a team I will not count out because of McVay winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Everything that he's done to change the offensive scheme and the game of the NFL since he's entered the league and became a head coach is really impressive. I know the coaching tree is something we value in our list. When you look at this McVay, Shanahan, Washington tree, it's just crazy. The amount of names from Kyle to McDaniels to the LaFleurs to Robert Saleh. They're just like so many different, D'Amico Ryans. They're just so many different guys that have come from that Washington coaching tree under the Shanahan family and McVay. I just think the Rams are one of those teams where I'm expecting them not to be that great, and I'm going to look foolish and be mad at myself in week 10 when they start off the season 6-4, and they're looking pretty good for a playoff spot in a wide open NFC. McVay's just one of those guys right in that criteria. Whenever you have him, you're going to have a chance to win, especially in the playoffs too. He's won some big games. I'll have him at number 3. Number 2, you got to go with Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick is interesting because there's some scrutiny. There's some pressure on the Patriots this year to have a big year, to make the playoffs. And if Bill Belichick wasn't their coach, that really would not happen with the roster they have. I know he's the GM, so a lot of that is his own doing as well. But when we do this list, it's not about the GM. It's what you do as a head coach on the football field. And there still aren't many guys in this league better than Belichick. New England, if you mess up against them, watch out, because they will always find a way to take advantage. Pretty self-explanatory. 6 Super Bowl rings of Bill Belichick at number 2. And at number 1, you got to go with Andy Reid. And the thing about Andy, which makes this ranking really justified in my head, is as soon as the rules in the NFL started to shift more towards the offensive side of the ball and favoring that side of the ball post 15, 20 years ago when you could hit anyone at any time, anywhere. Like, the defensive players really were at an advantage, but now it's the offensive side. And Andy Reid, a guy who he didn't win a Super Bowl during his time in Philadelphia or during his time in Kansas City before he got his great quarterback, but each and every year, whether it was with Alex Smith or Donovan McNabb or Jeff Garcia or that one year with Michael Vick when he was out of the league, Andy Reid would always have Philadelphia in contention, and we know everything that he's done since getting Patrick Mahomes, winning 2 Super Bowls. And I do think we could get into this sometime in this conversation as well. But if Andy Reid wants to coach for another 5, 6, 7 more years, I do think that he can make that gap between him and Belichick closer and closer and closer for the best coach ever, especially with his great quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. I just think it's so cool that Andy Reid was such a good coach for such a long time, but he couldn't necessarily get over that hump. And as soon as he gets that guy, he just takes off. The Chiefs hiring him before the 2014 season is one of the best decisions they've ever made in the history of their franchise. I will have Andy Reid of the Chiefs at number 1. So to recap my list, 1 through 10, Andy Reid at number 1, Bill Belichick at number 2, Sean McVay at number 3, Kyle Shanahan at number 4, Brian Daboll at number 5, Mike Vrabel at number 6, John Harbaugh at number 7, Pete Carroll at number 8, Doug Peterson at number 9, Sean Payton at number 10. Before we wrap, I do want to hit quickly on some guys that missed my list, but before we do that, I'll pass the mic right back over to you, Will.
Yeah, definitely. Who was number 2 and 3 again? I know Bill Belichick was number 2, and number 3 was who? McVay. And number 4?
Kyle,
and number 5 was all right, number 5 was Daboll. All right. I would like to respond to Daboll before I go with my top 5. You know, I think when you talk about Daboll, I thought about moving him in my top 10. He actually was 11. I actually have my entire list, and maybe, you know, we can make a graphic of our full 32 and just push that out on social media, because I do have a full 32. I actually have an order. He was number 11 for me. And the reason why he just barely missed out on the top 10 was because of the lack of accomplishments, you know. And I think the way how I formulated my list is a lot of reasons and criteria. You narrowed your criteria down to a pretty simple criteria. Mine was juggling a lot of, you know, things like coaching trees and, you know, resumes and success accomplishments and, you know, being a leader, leadership, X's and O's. And, you know, I think all of those things, or even some of those things, makes you a very good coach. And I think a lot of coaches have different strengths and weaknesses, as I alluded to before. I think for Brian Daboll, the X's and O's box he checks. We know that he can build up a quarterback and really get the best out of a quarterback. You know, I think a lot of people thinks he's a magician when it comes to fixing quarterbacks. I wouldn't go that far. A lot of people just think he just made Daniel Jones. He just made Josh Allen. No, I was high on Josh Allen, when he got drafted, and I was the only person on this show saying that Daniel Jones is not the 25th worst quarterback in the league. Okay, I was saying that he was better than that because I have a cognizant feel of elite quarterback play. Now, Brian Daboll definitely got the better version out of those guys. You can say definitely integral part of Josh Allen's development, definitely a very integral part of Daniel Jones' development as well. But I think as the receivers get better, when you talk about Darren Waller and Hyatt from Tennessee, and Paris Campbell, the speed from the Indianapolis Colts, I think we will see another level of Daniel Jones that could be scratching the surface of, can this guy win an MVP? And I think Brian Daboll is always going to get the credit for that. And that's the only thing that I don't like when you talk about Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones, is that everybody feels that Brian Daboll created Daniel Jones, created him out of his image. No, he didn't. I think Daniel Jones, he always showed me something. That's why I went on these shows and I said, you know what? He may not have the wins. He may be throwing the ball over a lot, right? He may be throwing a lot of interceptions and fumbles, but that guy can air the rock down the field. That guy has athleticism that you can't coach, right? And, I just don't think he will get that credit. So that's the only reason why I'm hesitant to really go all in calling this guy the magician of quarterbacks, because I do believe that Josh Allen still can have success without him. I still think that, Daniel Jones, right? Give him the right situation. Give him what he needs as a quarterback. Offensive line, weapons, proper coaching. It's really an extension of what you need as a quarterback. He can go all in with this guy, and you can win games with this guy. So Brian Daboll, once again, he still has a lot to prove to me. I don't really feel comfortable with putting him in my top 10, better yet top 5 after 1 year, because I do believe that as good as last year was and how he was able to economize his economic resources and what he had and win a playoff game with what he had, which wasn't really a lot, I want to see how he does now that he has better weapons and another year under his belt. Can he take that next leap? Can he defeat the Eagles, right? I understand the Eagles have, a smidge more talent than the Giants. Maybe a smidge is an understatement, but if you're that great coach, and if Daniel Jones is a very good quarterback, can y'all overtake the Eagles this year, right? For you to be ranked higher than Nick Sirianni, where I don't remember Nick Sirianni being in your list, Zach. So maybe you can explain why he wasn't.
That missed it.
Go ahead.
So starting off with what you said on Daboll, right? I'm not saying that he made any quarterback. I'm not saying he created those guys. What I'm saying is I watched both guys before they got there, Daboll, and after. When Josh Allen first came into the league from Wyoming, he was not very good. And Brian Daboll helped develop him into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Daniel Jones, you're right. You have always been a fan and you've liked him, but we saw what he looked like prior to Brian Daboll. The Giants themselves were like, nah, we're not picking up your 5th-year option. We don't plan on you being the quarterback here long term. And this year, as soon as he gets Brian Daboll, he wins them a playoff game. And I do think that part of me putting him this high is projecting into the future. And when I look at what he did last year, there's no reason for me not to think that with improved weapons, with an improved offensive line, as Daniel Jones, who's still a pretty young quarterback, gets better and deeper into his career, there's no reason for me to think that Brian Daboll cannot take this Giant team to the next level. And I'll tell you straight up, I think he's a better coach than Nick Sirianni. I think if you give Daboll the Eagles weapons, that team is unstoppable and might have one of the best offenses we ever seen. And I do also think that Sirianni, you hinted at it too, he was a big reason why the Eagles lost the Super Bowl. He made a couple decisions that really cost them in that game. The reason why, in my opinion, I am a big believer in the Eagles and everything they're doing has more to do with Jalen Hurts and their quarterback compared to Sirianni. I think it's important to remember that when Sirianni first got there, keep in mind he was an offensive coordinator in Indy. His first 10 games in Philly, the offense was terrible, so bad that he had to move Shane Steichen to the play calling duties, and that's when their offense took off. And then this year, their quarterback coach, Brian Johnson, it looks like he's going to be the one calling plays, not Sirianni. So I think Sirianni is one of those CEO coaches, which is pretty weird considering he was hired to be an offensive mind and really be an X's and O's offensive genius for this team. So if you ask me straight up, which coach would I rather have leading my team? Everything else is even around them, just starting from scratch. Daboll or Sirianni? My answer is Daboll, and I'm not even considering Sirianni.
Well, I just think when you talk about Sirianni, right, and the Eagles, winning playoff games, we just not going to act like Jalen Hurts came into the league and was dominant, right? Matter of fact, for crying out loud, they traded for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson nixed the trade. So I think last year, 2 years ago, was a product of a very good head coaching job, being able to rush the rock and winning with Devontae Smith as the number one wide receiver and playing to Jalen Hurts' strengths as a quarterback. That was obviously the offensive coordinator combined with the coach putting the offensive coordinator in a position. Not when you debate these coaches, right? And that's why I had the formula I had, which is taking everything in consideration, because you can't compare Brian Daboll's X's and O's to Nick Sirianni's, because Nick Sirianni's is not calling the plays. So I think when you talk about players, coaches, and CEOs,
we saw him call the plays for the first 10 games of last year.
And we saw him put the ego aside, right, to get somebody else, and that's good. You're not always going to be great at calling the plays, but when you could put your ego aside and adjust and get somebody in there who knows how to call plays and get him a job, jump-starting his coaching tree, then I think that's definitely something that you could look into and value. You're not going to be able to always have the play sheet like Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and all those coaches and be able to directly impact the game hands-on, but sometimes it's who you put in those predicaments. I think it's going to be a very big year for Sirianni to show, that he is amongst the top 10 as a coach. And Brian Daboll, like I said, he has a lot to prove. Can you beat the Eagles for once? Okay, can you not get run out the gym when you play the Eagles? Y'all played them 3 times last year. Y'all got smoked all 3 times. Can you at least win one, matchup against them? We got to see how that pans out.
Yeah, just to that, I think the disadvantage in talent was so big that the fact that, he went 0-3 against the Eagles, but the fact that this Giant team was a playoff team, the fact that Brian Daboll helped Daniel Jones get the contract that he got, they won a playoff game. The Giants were a disaster before
they was. And what's crazy, Zach? Because realistically, they didn't give Daniel Jones the best offensive line the last couple years. They didn't give him, crazy weapons. Best wide receiver that they used a couple years ago, and he wasn't even healthy enough, was the dude that just retired, John Ross III. So it's like when you have a quarterback, and I'm gonna drum this in every time we talk about quarterbacks. What you need is a good offensive line, weapons, and good coaching. So Brian Daboll is an extension of Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones is an extension of Brian Daboll. Anytime we talk about great coaches and we rank these great coaches, chances are they're going to have great quarterbacks, unless they're one of those unique greats, like a Bill Belichick. When you look at Mac Jones, well, we know what he did with Tom Brady, and why we talk about Bill Belichick and having that high is because of what he did with Tom Brady, not because of what he did. If we excluded Tom Brady off of that roster, we ranking Bill Belichick up in here, up in the top 5? Probably not, because we're gonna look at his resume and be like, where's the wins at? Where's the playoff wins? Right? So coaches and quarterbacks is mano y mano. You go 1A, 1B. They extensions of each other. But yeah, Zach, I'm down to getting my top 5. Coach is in the lobby. I'm gonna get Coach up in here. Coach, what's going on, my guy?
Feeling great, man. What's going on with you guys?
We doing good, man. We out here ranking our top 5 quarterbacks as we trying to, move on. And I just want to introduce you here. All right, Zach, if you want to kind of go over your top 10 one more time, just who did you have 1 through 10? So Coach could get familiar with that, and then I'll proceed with my top 5.
All right, yeah, just wanted to say, we decided to have our very good friend, Coach Mello, on today. He's known as the Coach, and we're ranking our top 10 coaches. We are also, after, have another list with coaches in the NFL we're going to get into as well. But Coach, I just finished up my top 10. Will is going to get into his top 5 when we're done. I will share my top 10 one more time. Sean Payton at number 10. Doug Peterson at number 9.
Okay.
Pete Carroll at number 8. John Harbaugh at number 7. I will say all 4 of those guys have won a Super Bowl, so very hard for me to really put those guys in order, but that was what I went with. Mike Vrabel at number 6. Brian Daboll at number 5. Kyle Shanahan at number 4. Sean McVay at number 3. And then, of course, Bill Belichick at number 2. Andy Reid at number 1.
Okay.
All right, Coach. And number 10 through number 6. At number 10, I had Mike Tomlin. At number 9, I had John Harbaugh.
Okay.
At number 8, I had Pete Carroll. At number 7, I had Nick Sirianni. And number 6, I had Sean Payton.
Okay.
So now I'm going to proceed with my top 5. And Coach and Zach, feel free to respond after
All
I'm
right.
done. All right. At number 5, off the rip, I'm going to go with Sean McVay at number 5. We talked about Sean Payton, and I left off with Sean Payton. This guy tried to pull a Sean Payton. He tried to retire. Okay, when things got a little bit hard. All right. And, it wasn't successful because he ultimately decided to come back and face the music, face the adversity. Because to be real with you, I did thought about moving him lower for one reason only, is that we didn't really see him with a lot of adversity for the most part. I'm going to talk about why I did ultimately have him number 5, and that's exactly what did it for me. But prior to him making a home, with the Rams, he didn't have a lot of adversity. He always had a owner that was willing to spend,
Yes.
a owner that was willing to be aggressive and trade assets and forego the future for the present. And that's why, you have a good team. You're always going to be a coach that's going to win games with a great roster, right? But we know his X's and O's, brings out the greats in quarterbacks, right? And he did so with Jared Goff for the most part. There were games like the Chiefs game. That was one of the best regular season games of all time. And Jared Goff was able to score 40 points in that game to outdo Patrick Mahomes. He's inventor of the new ways of offense in the NFL. And I just can't picture where the Rams would be without Sean McVay. When I try to dive in my brain, what would the Rams look like? What if, right? We talk about what ifs a lot on the show. We have a segment on what if, even though we didn't do it in a long time, right? Maybe soon in the future. What if the Rams didn't have Sean McVay? I mean, they were 4-12 before he took over the job, and he transformed the franchise into an innovative offense, a franchise that won a Super Bowl as soon as he had a quarterback upgrade in Matthew Stafford. And yes, they are trending in the wrong direction. They seem to be trending downwards right now. I'm going with that competitive rebuild, which is not really sustainable for success. And that's why, we're going to see if he really could coach under pressure. Last year he was very uninspired. It looked like the Super Bowl hangover kind of kicked in.
Absolutely.
Now, what you said?
No, I'm saying I'll just agree with you.
What do you think?
No, yeah, I truly think that Super Bowl got to him, and they gave up all their assets, so they really couldn't build on nothing the following year. Pretty much they bring A-Rob. A-Rob didn't do nothing for them. Bobby Wagner didn't do nothing for them. Von Miller had left for free agency, and it was just unfortunate for that team.
It was, and the guy got married, Sean McVay. I mean, it didn't seem like he was focused on football.
Right.
Let me bring something up quickly. So it's funny. I just saw this the other day, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, we have to talk about this on the show. You mentioned he just got married. His wife is pregnant and is apparently expecting to have a baby, like around week 7, week 8. I just know the takes are going to be flowing, especially if he misses any meetings leading in, any practices leading in, let alone the game. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and Dujane, corrected that he had a death in the family. I had no idea about that. Maybe that impacted his decision to balance retirement. Who knows? But all I do know was he came back, from the movie The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm back. You know what I'm saying? And he's back, and we'll see if that means anything because of where the Rams are today, right now, and how we view them, which is not very high compared to teams like the Eagles and the 49ers. At number 4, I am going to go with, and Zach, I did mention him, but I'm just now mentioning him. At number 4, I'm going with Doug Peterson. Listen, this was easy ranking him in my top 5 to me. He just knows how to win with lesser talent, and I value those things, right? Sometimes you are going to have stacked rosters with superstar athletes and quarterbacks and, weapons, but can you win with lesser talent? And he has shown us that he can. I'm a Tom Brady fan. He beat us with Nick Foles as his quarterback in the Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, and back to irrelevancy, Nick Foles went after that. He went right back into the abyss. And you talk about the Jaguars' weapons last year. First of all, you talk about saving Trevor Lawrence's career last year. I mean, it was looking really, really spiteful out there. Matter of fact, this was the same gig that my guy Brian Leverage turned down. Okay, where are you now, Brian Leverage? Where are you now, brother? I feel like I could be able to pull you into the show. So much time on your hands, right? You ain't doing nothing right now. Come through. Come to 99 Pod, Mr. Brian Leverage, because you turned down a job that you should have had turned down. And Doug Peterson was in Hollywood. He didn't make demands. Oh, fire, the owner or whatever. No. Okay, nah. I'm actually gonna come here and I'm gonna take over and I'm gonna fix the mess that Urban Meyer left. And that's exactly what he did. I remember a lot of people was laughing at the contract that Christian Kirk got. Why are you paying this guy $84 million? Who is Zay Jones? Never heard of this cat. Well, they performed well in that wild card, okay, against the Chargers. Christian Kirk was out here making plays, okay, leaving defenders silly with his route running and all that. So the fact that he's able to economize what's around him and bring the best out of those guys is why he's here. And the fact that he won a Super Bowl already, and I like his aggressive go for it mentality, right? If there's a fourth down, he's going to go for it. I like that. You don't win games by trying not to lose games. You win games by trying to win games. Go for it. And that's exactly what he has done. He did it in the wild card. He's very aggressive. He spices things up, right? And I like that. I like the innovative process that goes behind a guy behind the play sheet. And he's one of those guys that, I'm high on this year. I'm high on the Jaguars this year, right? Largely in due to Trevor Lawerence and Doug Peterson. I think they're going to be the next great head coach quarterback duo. Okay, you talk about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Well, you're going to have to start talking about Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawerence. And Trevor Lawerence is going to keep Doug Peterson coaching for as long as he wants to coach. Okay, and that's why he's number 4 for me. So, yeah, I'll leave us with that. At number 3, I'm going to go with Mr. 28-3. My guy, Mr. Blow a lead like it's blowing money at the strip club, Kyle Shanahan. At number 3, I'm going to go with him. Lil, why you coming at the dude and you have him at number 3 like that? Well, that's the love-hate relationship that I got with this guy, Kyle Shanahan. I mean, come on. We know what this guy's good at. He's good at constructing an offense, making a quarterback-friendly offense. We know that he is one of the more premier offensive play callers in the league. We know that for sure. I mean, the guy can scheme.
Yep.
Maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. But he can scheme. But let's start off with the good before we get to the bad, right? Because, I actually thought about putting him higher in the beginning. A long time ago. Not recently, but like 2 years ago or a year ago, I was like, maybe I could put him number 1. Yeah, all right. I'll talk about why I said that. But the good thing, like I said, he already jump-started his coaching tree. The only person that really could take that prestige, premier, offensive-minded, best in the league label away from him is possibly a guy who I've yet to mention, Andy Reid, and possibly a guy that came from his coaching tree and Mike McDaniel. He may be. Give Mike McDaniel time. I know I don't have him in my top 10 right now. He just barely missed it. But give Mike McDaniel some time. He might be one of those premier offensive play callers in the league. And he came from the branch of Kyle Shanahan. Like I said, Brock Purdy, Jimmy G, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, no matter who the quarterback is, the players and the weapons on this team, they don't seem to care. Notice when Jimmy G, they was rocking out with Jimmy G, they didn't care. Then Jimmy G goes down or they drafted Trey Lance and they're like, all right, fine, we rock with Trey Lance. Then Trey Lance goes down. Anybody look nervous to you? Nah. We rock out with Jimmy G. Then Jimmy G went down. You would think that after they lost Jimmy G and Trey Lance last year, that was a wrap. It was far from a wrap. They subbed in Brock Purdy, a guy that they called Mr. Irrelevant. Really? That's your nickname? Oh, nah, man. Nah. And immediately, it didn't look like nobody was worried on this team. They went out there. We know the offense runs through the playmakers on this team, and they did their thing. And now it's looking like Brock Purdy's going to be QB1. And no matter who's the quarterback, Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, they're always going to have a chance to win games. Why? Because they have the mastermind behind the play sheet that's keeping everything together in Kyle Shanahan. Now, let's go to the bad before I move on. It just seems to me, the bigger the moment, the more conservative this guy is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't remember the last time I seen this guy win for a 4th down, man. He's very conservative on 4th downs. And you can't be like that, my brother. And it just seems like the bigger the moment, the bigger the high profile game, the more conservative he gets. And it's funny because they beat the Cowboys last year and they almost blew that game. If Dak Prescott was any good and he was a top 10 quarterback, people still ranking him in the top 10. Why? I don't know. But if he was still good and if he was a good quarterback, they would have won that game, right? And then I would have came on the show and lit this dude on fire because there were examples on the same stuff I've seen in the past about him going in his shell when the game is tightening up. But luckily for him, Dak Prescott ain't that dude. And that's why he was able to, win that game or whatever. But last year, the NFC Championship game, I mean, you can't really penalize him for that. Quarterbacks, he just ran out. Bill Belichick ran out of coordinators last year. He ran out of quarterbacks. What could you do? So there's good and bad. But once again, Kyle Shanahan, offensive innovator, he's a top 3 horseman in the NFL for me. That's why he's number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with Bill Belichick. Listen, Bill Belichick, man, I don't know what to do with this guy. If I was Robert Kraft, I don't know, man. I probably would have had to fire this guy a long time ago because I would have just strangled this guy. I would have just strangled him. You know why? Because this guy's a good coach. And I feel like his legacy is being affected. His legacy of being a coach is being affected by GM Belichick. Right? GM Belichick is always leaving a mess for the coach Belichick to clean up. And you just want to strangle this guy. I don't know how Robert Kraft does it. I really don't know. Praise be to him because he's holding it down. I would have got frustrated already. But like I said, we know why he's still a coach. Because Robert Kraft is not dumb enough to fire this guy and allow this guy to go coach Justin Herbert or something like that and Dak Prescott, because that would be exactly what stops the Patriots from winning anything anymore, right? So that's why he's not going to fire him. I get it. But look, his resume is not great pre and post Tom Brady. We know that. But as a Tom Brady fan, and yes, I am the biggest Tom Brady fan in the Eastern Hemisphere, I can tell you, so please don't come in with that bull crap. Please. This guy was as important to the dynasty as anybody could have been. Not named Tom Brady. He was right there with Tom Brady, right? Having a defense. Remember, I understand it's a quarterback-driven league, but the football game, the NFL, is the most team-reliant sport there is in America. You have defense. You have special teams. And one thing the Patriots are not going to do, excluding last year's debacle with Mac Jones and the Raiders in that game, is lose all special teams and turnovers, okay? All right? They're not going to lose in that department. So that speaks to a testament of how well coached they are. They have their formula, the Patriot way. And like I said, there's nobody who I would want to take in a coach off, right? If you told me the forecast, it's going to be windy, right? It's going to be snowy, who is one coach that you want coaching your team in those conditions? It's Bill Belichick. You remember a couple years ago when they played the Bills in the Monday Night Football game and it was windy and you couldn't even throw the rock like that? Bill Belichick said, I'm going to run the ball 20, 30 times on y'all cats. Stop it. Kept doing it till the W was in the column. That's Bill Belichick. And as much as I want to strangle this cat, I just can't help but sit back and be like, how the hell y'all won 9 games with Cam Newton when your number 1 receiver and your number 2 receiver was named Demare Bird and Jacoby Myers, right? As much as I want to, how the hell 2 years ago you win a playoff game, you get to the playoffs with a rookie quarterback in Mac Jones, right? When I want to, how could you win 9 games with a defensive coordinator calling offensive plays? Okay, as much as I'm gonna, they probably will win 9 games this year. When on paper they have the worst weapons in the AFC East, they probably 9 games. So Robert Kraft, I feel your pain, buddy. I really do. But yes, Bill Belichick is that dude. He's number 2. Don't confuse GM Belichick with Coach Belichick. Don't make that mistake. He's number 2. At number 1, I'm gonna go with Andy Reid, and I think Zach laid it out perfectly. He had a Hall of Fame resume before Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so please, ladies and gentlemen, right? Please don't try to spin this narrative that Patrick Mahomes, who's a great quarterback, all-time great quarterback, by the way, made this cat. Shut your mouth. He didn't. All right, this guy went to 4 straight NFC championship games with the Eagles prior to Patrick Mahomes even being a myth. Okay? Don't start it. If anything, if you want to say somebody made somebody's career, and I told you not to say it, but I'd rather you say that way than this way. Yeah, maybe go Tom Brady made Bill Belichick, possibly, because you could show me the resume and be like, all right, this was Bill Belichick before and after Tom Brady. All right, fine. I ain't going to co-sign it, but fine. But don't do that bull crap here, because this guy was already a Hall of Famer, and he's even more a Hall of Famer now. And like Zach said, a couple years from now, we could be having a conversation about this cat potentially being the greatest coach of all time. He's that innovative. Okay, nobody uses pre-snap motion more than Kansas City, which throws the defenders off guard on God. In the Super Bowl, 77% of their offensive plays in the Super Bowl was pre-snap motion. It involved pre-snap motion. And that's why the Eagles had all sorts of fits, right? And he out-coached Gannon in the Super Bowl. He changed his diapers in front of the world to see. Okay, respectfully. All right, this guy is it. He's that dude. All right, he has the most successful coaching tree. I understand Bill Belichick have a big coaching tree, but they don't generally do good. You still got to give Belichick credit for that because he gave them jobs, and that's actually a more indicative of how good of a coach Bill Belichick is. The fact that he gets so many guys jobs and they come right back to him. Mm-hmm. But Andy Reid, his coaching tree is legit. They win. Sean McDermott, winner, right? I don't have him in my top 10, but resume, winner. John Harbaugh in my top 10, winner. Matt Nagy, you don't want to nag me. Doug Peterson, okay. Juan Rivera, all right. Riverboat Ron, Todd Bowles, Steve Spagnuolo. You already know, though. I live by YOLO. You only live once. That's my list. All right, my top 5. All right, we are wrapping things up. At number 5, Sean McVay. At number 4, Doug Peterson. At number 3, Kyle Shanahan. At number 2, Bill Belichick. And number 1, Andy Reid. That's my top 5, guys. Thoughts?
Well, yes, I do. Well, for Zach, I'm gonna go with Zach first. Then I'm gonna come to you, Lil. Zach, what made you valuable? What's so valuable about Vrabel to be at your number 6 spot?
Yeah, Coach, it's funny. Before you got here, Lil and I spoke a lot about this. I honestly thought 6 might have been too low for this guy, and it's crazy because he didn't make Lil's top 10. I think when you look at Vrabel, just every year the Titans, I feel like we kind of cast them aside, and that includes this year, by the way, which is kind of a reason why I'm nervous. But I just feel like every year they're significantly better than we could have ever expected. And he turned Ryan Tannehill into a quarterback for a number 1 seed in the AFC. I don't know how many other coaches in the league could have been able to do that. And I know that when you look at Tennessee, they've come up short in a few playoff games in a few spots. But I just think this team has been more relevant and better than anyone could have ever expected since Vrabel took over. It's clear the locker room loves him. One thing I'm a little nervous about, and I'm curious, Coach, for your thoughts on this, is I didn't love the fact that they fired their GM like midway through the season when they were in first place in the AFC South. I thought that was a little bit of a power play by Vrabel to the owner, but you could say he deserves it because of all the great work that he's done on the field as a head coach in his career. As soon as he got to Tennessee, they turned into a franchise that's at least relevant in every game they play every year. I'm going to be curious to see about this year. I didn't love the Hopkins signing just because of the fact I don't think it made them any closer to winning anything. Right. But that's just another weapon on Vrabel's disposal. And the more of those he has, the more likely Tennessee is going to be to win games. So it just shows you Tennessee's a team I'm down on entering the year, but I'm nervous about that just because this guy is their head coach, and that would be why I had him ranked in the top 10.
Okay, awesome. And Lil, for you, I see that you have Mr. 28-3 at number 3. Oh, that's bars. But what do you see in him? Like, granted, I do believe that he is a great, play caller, a great schemer, but he can never get over the hump. Like, what could he do to get over the hump to kind of put his name at, to put his legacy out there?
And I'll add to that question. Does it have to do with the quarterback position at all?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, right, the reason why Kyle Shanahan, a.k.a. Mr. 28-3, is number 3, being the one coach in my top 5 that doesn't have a ring on his finger, is because I said it yesterday. The 49ers is the NFC version of the Kansas City Chiefs, just without the accomplishments. There's a reason why every single year you know you're going to get the 49ers in a divisional round or an NFC championship game, potentially a Super Bowl, and that's because they're well coached. I think for me, when you look at Jimmy G is not an elite quarterback. Where was he ranked on your list, Zach?
22.
Damn.
Exactly. He was ranked number 20 something on mine, 23. I think Zach was more generous than I was. He was around that same thing for me. But yet you almost win a Super Bowl with him. That's because you were a great coach and you had a great ecosystem. You know, Zach, will you have Mac Jones on your list by any chance?
24.
24. I had him 27, 8, one of those, 26 or something like that, 25, one of those, same place. But you know what, Zach, if Mac Jones was on the 49ers right now, where would you have him?
Pretty higher. And let me say one thing, too. Kyle Shanahan, the 1 year the Niners didn't make the playoffs recently. That was the COVID year with no fans in 2021. The whole team was hurt. Jimmy G was hurt. It was one of the worst. And that has continued, by the way, to Jimmy G this past year. But that 2021 49ers team had some of the worst injury luck I've ever seen. They're out here starting CJ Beathard at quarterback, and they were still competitive, and they won some games. I remember the Cardinals were in the playoff race that year. They collapsed down the stretch, and San Francisco beat them in a big game in Arizona. Kyle Shanahan, you give him CJ Beathard, he'll even give your team a chance to win.
Exactly. There you go. He summed it up perfectly. And Brock Purdy is another guy. He brought Mr. Irrelevant to relevancy.
Yes.
And now he's out here with a chance to win an NFC championship game, with a chance to win a Super Bowl. A lot of people, you ask the consensus around, the league or any fan, who's the two teams in the NFC that potentially could be duking it out to go to the Super Bowl, you would say 49ers and the Eagles. And that's why Kyle Shanahan is this high, because no matter who's a quarterback, his system works. Nobody has an answer for it. Nobody can stop it. There's a lot of playmakers here. So it's just about the musical chairs with the quarterbacks. And hopefully, he could figure out, for once, who is his guy long term. That's what this year is going to come down to for me. And what I want to see is him figuring out what does he prioritize for his quarterback. Okay, like what is he looking for? Because he went off the Jimmy G rails to go with the Trey Lance. So I'm thinking, all right, maybe he wants to upgrade and modernize his quarterback by getting an athletic quarterback who could rush, be a dual threat guy and have a stronger arm down the field to make the throws, to open up the offense a little bit more and add another dimension. Okay, that didn't work. Now we back to Brock Purdy. What is the guy that you're looking for? And stick with that guy. That's the only thing I want to see from him, and why, he could go up or go lower based on if he figures that out this year.
And he's another guy where you could make the argument like his moves as a GM, as bad as they are, they don't affect his placement on the rankings. Because I've said it for a while now, like I think this Trey Lance situation should be one of the more talked about storylines going into this NFL season. The fact that the 49ers basically gave up their whole future for this guy, and now he's nowhere to be found. He's taking third team reps at training camp. My biggest question for Trey Lance and his future in this league is if anyone's even going to want to trade for him, or is he just going to spend this season warming the bench in San Francisco?
And another thing too, you have to realize how hard it is to go back to last year and talk about how Jimmy G wasn't even practicing with the team. Okay, he was on a different sideline.
Yep.
Trying to throw, with whoever, and Trey Lance was the guy who they were preparing for. He goes down, and yet they're able to change the playbook. He's able to change the playbook, and go back to Jimmy G and then do the same thing with Brock Purdy in the year. There's nobody last year, okay, and this may be a hot take, but there's nobody last year that faced more adversity than Kyle Shanahan. Okay, when you talk about the quarterbacks he juggled in the regular season, and when you talk about the quarterbacks he juggled and ran out of in the NFC Championship game, nobody went under more adversity, and that's why he actually won my Coach of the Year. I gave him that award on the show, my personal, pick to win that award, even though he didn't get it. So yeah, Coach, any last remarks?
Any last remarks I have? So, what are your expectations for Belichick this year? You were talking about his legacy. The different version. GM Belichick, coaching Belichick. Just want to know which type of Belichick are we getting this season?
I think we're going to get the same Belichick that we have accustomed to see post Tom Brady, which is a team right now where you're looking at them, we're saying potentially they may be the third or fourth, team in the AFC East and on paper, and then they're probably going to win 9 games because they're going to win some games that they're not supposed to. A lot of people talk about the Lions, right? And what does the Lions have to do with Bill Belichick? I'm going to tell you exactly what they have to do with Bill Belichick, right? Because there was a team that had a top 6 scoring offense last year, and guess what Bill Belichick did to them last year? 0. I mean, literally shut them down. And Bill Belichick can do that very consistently. It's shut down. If you're not an elite quarterback, you're not beating the Patriots. Okay? I repeat, if you're not an elite quarterback, you're not beating the Patriots. Anybody that tears them to shreds, that defense, is because they're elite. Okay? So, Jared Goff, good quarterback, right? A better version of himself than the previous years, but he's not great. That's why they shut them down.
That's the first time we've seen Jared Goff go up against Belichick, and that's then,
Right.
The second time, the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? You remember the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
So, exactly. So, what I expect is the same thing we're accustomed to seeing. Win 9 games, fringe playoff team, for a little bit short, possibly. But Bill Belichick did a good enough coaching job to the point where it's like, all right, do we pull the trigger and fire this guy, or, how do we, move on and get better?
All right. And
one last time to make on that. Will said, if you light up the Patriots, you're an elite quarterback. We'll see what that means for Justin Fields and his future as well.
Yes, sir. And my last question for the both of you, any of you could answer, right? You guys put Andy Reid at number 1, which I totally agree. So Andy Reid lost his offensive coordinator to Washington. He lost Juju Smith-Schuster to free agency. He drafted 2 receivers late, well, not late, but mid-round receivers. Do you believe that the Chiefs offense will sustain the same energy heading into the season?
My answer would be yes, because honestly, I was way more concerned about the loss of Tyreek Hill last year, and they still had the best offense in the league. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, as long as you have those 2 guys, you're going to score plenty of points.
If I could answer that as fast as Zach, I think this skepticism, I won't say it's worrisome, because I was worried when they lost Tyreek Hill. Clearly, Mahomes won an MVP. Clearly, Mahomes won a Super Bowl. So I'm not as concerned, but I am skeptical to see which one of these receivers can step up and be that number 1, right? Because I understand that committee format, and obviously I'm not going to be as quick as Zach. I understand that committee format of, okay, it's your game, my game. Travis Kelce, obviously he's going to be the number 1. He's the primary target on this team for Patrick Mahomes. But who can be a consistent week-to-week wide receiver? I like Justin Ross. I always said I like this guy from Clemson way before. He kind of went under the radar because he hurt himself last year. I believe he tore an ACL or something like that. He was out for the whole last year. So I like that guy. Or they just going to go with this, Patrick Mahomes play point guard type of offense. I just think it's very, just looking at them compared to what the Bills have and what the Bengals have. How does this match up? Is Mahomes' greatness going to overshadow anything anymore? And Andy Reid's greatness of a play caller. But, Zach, to some extent, is right. Anytime you have Andy Reid's play calling abilities and Patrick Mahomes' abilities, you should be in any game you play. So to beat the Chiefs, you got to stone the Chiefs. And we'll see if any of these teams could stone them.
Quickly, I'll say 2 plus Kelce, like those 3 guys, and they have options. I don't necessarily know who the guy is going to be yet, whether it's Tony, whether it's Valdez-Scantling, whether it's Justin Ross, whether it's Juju or not Juju.
No, Richie.
Yeah, Richie James. Yeah, like Sky Moore, like they drafted Rashee Rice, like you mentioned, Coach. Like they have plenty of options. So those 3 guys, like that's the thing about Mahomes, which is to me, which is one of the main reasons why I think he's the best of the best, is like he just makes other guys around him better. And the fact that they lost Hill, that's all I really needed to see.
I think also, real quickly, when you talk about Andy Reid and how he found a way to beat the 2 high shell safety looks, right? Because that's what teams was playing on Kansas City, was that 2 high safety, don't give up the big play, keep everything, make them methodically beat you down the field. Who we think told Mahomes to be patient? Do we really think that, Mahomes organically was smart enough? I'm not saying he's not smart, but had the cognizant awareness enough to say, all right, I need to be patient here and take what the defense is giving me. Nah, that was Andy Reid coaching him up.
Right.
You know, so when you talk about the offense and how they have so many guys that are like gadget prototypes, like Kadarius Toney, gadget prototype, Sky Moore, gadget prototype. They're not your normal, stand with the number one corner, go down the field type of receivers that actually works against the two high shelled safety looks because you're not keeping them on an island. They're always in constant motion. So that's why they're able to beat those looks. So,
please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.